So my approach to directing this piece is it's huge. It's enormous. It's a Victorian novel, so it was like looking at it sort of face front. It looked deceptively simple, and then when I started, it then became very, very big. So I basically where my approach was to sort of almost like see it as in layers. So so layers that are on top of each other. So working on the character and the characters, the timeline, who's doing what, when, and then looking. And then I looked at some the logistics. So just sort of putting every scene up on its feet to give it some a third dimension. So it came off the page, and basically in each individual scene getting its text analysis, its scene analysis, what's happening, what are the objectives, what are the sort of character dynamics, and doing that throughout the whole play. And that was a massive job. And then I looked at taking one line of the narrative. So for instance, our Nancy has a series of monologues. So we then looked at just at the monologues out of sequence. Then we looked at all the Syria-Turkey scenes out of, on their own. We looked at all the London and the gang scenes on their own. We looked at all the interrogation scenes on their own. So that each of those strands of the narrative, we could kind of at least sort of plot the arc of them and the changes that happen in those arcs. And then I looked at the mechanics of the scene changes. Who goes off where, who goes off when, and then so the process we're in at the moment is we're squishing all of that together again. So that's all the character work, the storytelling work, putting all the scenes back into chronological sequence as written in the play, and then putting on all the logistical work around who goes off, where, when, what costume change, what prop goes from where, and all of that. So it feels like it's been staging it in stratas, and then sort of now I'm at this point, I'm now sort of trying to place them all together, and hopefully through the runs what we'll be seeing is that they'll start to gel, and then the idea is that becomes with practice more seamless. So that's kind of how I've had to do it. It's been quite scientific in the respect of like dissecting the piece into its different elements and then bringing them all together in the sort of final stages. So I developed the script with Chino, but not just Chino, but also with Sarah Dickinson, who's on board in the team as our dramaturg. And it was quite a different kind of dynamic in one respect, because usually the writer comes to me with an idea and I commission it. But this time I commissioned the writer. I had the idea, I had an idea of how the reimagining could work. And then, so what me, Chino and Sarah did was we sat in a room for 3 days and we kind of talked about the book, we talked about the characters, we talked about what was happening in the news, we talked about, and then we kind of started to find the connections. And then we started to, with the research that we've done, is talk about how the circumstances or the stories that we were hearing in the news could be transposed into the narratives. And so what we did over that 3 days is that we didn't do any writing. There was no writing of the text, but the big flip chart paper of then this character, and then this happens, and then this happens, and this happens. And then Chino took all of that away and started to sort of pull it all together into some kind of dramatic form. And we've gone through almost like a 3-4 draft process. So the first draft was really just like, this is all the notes in some kind of dramatic form. And what that did is we recognized that we had to have a frame for the story to, how does the story come out? So the second draft really experimented with what that frame was, and that's how that's when the interrogation room scenes started to emerge, as well as the Nancy character talking her inner thoughts directly to the audience. So all of that came through in the second draft. And then in the third draft, it was almost like, so we knew how to structure the play, or how the frame should work, and then in the third draft it really became, at that point, Chino's play, where she started to sort of really colour in the characters, started to give them certain idiosyncrasies, started to really look at the sort of different character dynamics, and so on and so forth. And then there was a fourth draft that came out of the initial read-through in rehearsals, where we just sort of looked at a few sort of different details of like plot, but also just sort of characteristics that the characters had with each other and how they played and their sort of relationships, and bringing that through. And then the play has also done another stage of development through rehearsals, where we've kind of like putting it up on its feet and looking at how the scenes work, and then adjusting and tweaking the scenes in order to sort of get the best playing from those scenes. So it's been a very, very, very live process in that respect. And it's very different to starting to rehearse a play as a finished product, and then but therefore just taking it off the page. We are literally, we're shaping, we're sculpting, we're tweaking as we're going along. And that's very much, the text is influencing the staging, and the staging is influencing the text. And so there's a real dynamic between the staging and the text in a way that I've never really experienced before. The way that we've worked with other production elements is very similar to the way that the text has evolved through that sort of collaboration between the writer, myself, the writer, and the dramaturg, in that by doing it, we start to, what's required starts to emerge. It's very much a chicken and egg situation, in that you've got to start with something and then find out whether it works or not. So I gave very broad brushstrokes. I'm talking specifically about the music and the sound at this point. Very broad brushstrokes as to what I think was required from the music, in that it needed to give us location, and it needed to give, so there's two different worlds in the play. There's the Middle Eastern world of the travelling, and then there's the London world of the trafficked and the gang. Both me and Chino felt that those two worlds had to have very clear demarcations to sort of signpost us where we were. The interrogation room also had its own, is its own world, and we wanted a sense of, we always go back there, but also time passing. So the sound needs to signpost us into these different worlds. But then there's also a more inherent role that the sound has, in that we've got so many scenes, and we've got to move so many scenes, and maintain a momentum and a drive through them, that the sound needs to not only reference the worlds, but also needs to drive the energy from scene to scene to scene to scene. What Teo's done is kind of come in with initial thoughts and melodies and themes, and then we've talked about, as I've gone through, we've talked about what's required here in order to drive the moment and the energy of the scene, and he's gone and then either rewritten stuff or taken what he's got and adapted it. So a very clear point was that there's a beautiful oud within the Middle Eastern scenes, which gives us a real sense of that location and that place and that culture. And we need to sort of really change it when we go into those London scenes, because the minute we hear that oud, we think we're back in Turkey. It's been a very organic journey in that respect, of like trying things and then sort of feeding back and seeing how things work. And again, it's another layer of my stratas that goes on top. And it kind of, the music also works, I think, as a holding place, because the scenes are very short and they are played at quite high drama. And so the music helps the actors play that high drama because it gives that drive. In terms of lighting, I think that's quite a straightforward job, is that there's lots of different places, and different sort of parts of the stage, and it's about making sure that we have that movement between those different places, with bits of texture coming in to sort of, whether it's warm, whether it's cold, whether we have specials, whether we sort of close in on a person, or whether we kind of bring something against the set, sort of sunlight against the set to give a sort of certain time of day. And I think Doug's working on a very sort of straightforward, where are we, what time of day it is, what do we need to see, and then put texture, overlay texture on that. So again, lots of conversation, but a lot of just watching what's happening and then going, and then him making his plan. What happens in Tech Week? Tech Week is a moment in the whole rehearsal process where it's very, very exciting, because people come and go in and out of rehearsals. They watch what's happening with the actors. They go away and do all of their stuff, and everything is kind of quite theoretical. It's on plans, it's in cue lists, etc., etc. And what Tech Week is a very methodical going through everything and making sure everything works in tandem. So we will basically, the set will get dressed and all the final touches will go onto the set, and final decisions will be made whether that works, or that works. And then we very methodically go through the play, and we don't go cue to cue, we go through the play and we play it. And whenever we come against a sticking point, whether that's a sound cue, a lighting cue, a prop, a costume, anything like that that's to do with anything but the actors, we stop, we sort it out, we come up with a solution, we run it again, we keep moving forward. So it usually takes around a day to day and a half to just go through the play really, really methodically. Like I've built the work with the actors in the rehearsal room on these different levels, that particular cake goes onto the stage, and then we kind of layer in all the other qualities, lighting, sound, maybe do some reworking. Now we're in space, and things that we're working in the rehearsal room maybe don't feel so great, so we have a quick look at those, and we just methodically go through the text. And then at the end of that, you have the dress rehearsals, which is basically you run everything together without stopping, and that's a chance for the actors to get used to everything and have runs at the play, but also so that the stage manager can, which I always see as the sort of the other actor, absolutely fine-tunes the rhythm of the technical aspects, because they're backstage cueing all that sound, so they have to feel the show as much as the actors do. And that's when the Tech Week and the dress rehearsals is very much about finding that rhythm and that flow. I would like young people to take from this production an idea or a question about what kind of world they want to live in when there is so much sort of strife in it, and a sense of what it means to have a home, and to sort of really ask themselves of, if we all want to have a home, how can we help people have a home, whether it's back in their own country or whether it's in this country, and to have that conversation about how we live with each other side by side, and how do we help ourselves feel safe, and how do we help others feel safe and have a home. Because essentially both Oliver Twist and this story is about a young boy, a young child who turns into a young person through the course of the play, seeking a family, seeking a home, and that we don't turn those people away. My advice to anybody wanting to become a director is, first of all, know why you want to be a director, because it's not just about doing the directing, it's about knowing what you want to say and what stories you want to put on stage is as important as knowing how to direct. And then I would say my next advice for anybody wanting to be a director is read a lot of plays, go and see a lot of theatre, and start talking to people, whether it's actors or other directors or other people interested, about why they do what they do, how they do it. Because I think the thing is you start to build up your own toolkit. And my final advice to anybody that wants to be a director is to try and find or make as many opportunities as you can to direct. Whether that's a production, or whether it's a 1-hour workshop, or whether it's you want to just, it's a laboratory or anything, you can do that very cheaply. You just need a space and a couple of friends, and start to experiment with the ideas that you're reading about or you're thinking about, and do it, because then you start to build up your own methodology.